Geoff, you worked for your father in the 1990s, on course, in shop, and on phone lines. He was an outspoken bookmaker, not afraid to take a view. I've heard you say you never saw him turn down a bet. So there's some strong parallels there. You are well known for going best price on high-profile events, often during England football tournaments. But I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about you and the reasons why you are so passionate about this industry, away from some of the hot topics that are doing the rounds at the moment. So I'm very glad that you've taken some time to talk to me.
Great. Yeah, great. Look forward to it, Dave.
All right, Geoff. So, what is your first memory? Obviously, as a kid, your father in the industry. What is the first memory you have of sort of being aware that sports betting was a thing?
Well, I mean, I think my love of my love of bookmaking sort of grown. Obviously, it came from my father. I mean, my father was a pretty flamboyant man. For those that knew of him, used to run around the country in his own little private plane. A little Piper Aztec that he had. I think I flew in it a couple of times. I thought I was going to die. And it was, he would go all around the country. He was extremely flamboyant. He had a yellow Rolls-Royce. He basically had all the tricks for boosting his profile. He would bet quite often on the back lines because of the way that the ring structure was in those days, that you couldn't just buy a pitch. It was all hereditary. You had to have been there for years. So he was often in rings with quite small bookmakers in those days at the front line, but who had been there, family businesses for years and years and years. So, he grew up on he would be at the back line, but very often offering the best prices. He used to love taking on firms like Ladbrokes, who used to invest a lot in the ring in order to suppress prices, and he would delight in taking their money. Most of the time, you'd have false favourites in those days. You didn't have Betfair, and he would delight in taking Ladbrokes' money and then putting the price up again to make it even more expensive for them to shorten the price of horses. So there was a running battle between him and Ladbrokes for years. I mean, my youngest memories of racing is seeing a succession of racing's leading jockeys come round to his house most Sundays for chats, right, disappear into his office and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I have known the guts, the nuts and bolts of, horse racing, and why horse racing to many people is so engaging, so fun. Yeah, it's got that sort of element about it. It's not quite straight and all the rest of it from time to time. And, I used to, like seeing all these big names just, come in on a Sunday and, for chats, or be swimming in his pool. Some of them were racing gods, right up to the very top of the jockey game. So yeah, it was, it was fun to be the son of a bookmaker.
I think either your father, John, or you are on the record as saying the jockeys are the worst tipsters. Does that still hold true?
No, God, yes. No, absolutely. I mean, I think he used to tell me the tale of when he would sit at Newmarket in the hotels at night, say in the Rutland Arms, yeah, and, a jockey would pass by and he said, hello, John, and my father would ask the jockey, what do you fancy tomorrow? And the jockey would, of course, promptly tip whatever he was riding, or, whatever stable he was riding for, or whatever. And from that, he just basically, and he would tell them, conclude that they were just the worst tipsters in the world. But of course, his activities with jockeys in those days weren't about getting horses to win. It was quite the opposite.
Right. Okay. So what was his route into bookmaking then? And so what decade are we talking?
Oh God, we're talking 50s, 60s.
Okay.
So quite some time ago, and I think he started, I think it was Shawfield Dogs. That was the first place that he used to make a book. He used to, hand me over the turnstiles and never would pay for me. So, I mean, I that grew up for me like a love of the dogs. I mean, I still love the dogs to this day. I think it's an amazing sport.
Yeah.
So he would, as I say, he would bet at these greyhound tracks in those times, like Shawfield, and they were hugely popular in those days. These tracks would be rammed in the evening because there was no Sky and no Netflix and all the rest of the things that keep people engaged these days. So greyhound tracks were an enormous popular pastime for the thing. It's a shame the way things have gone, because greyhounds are great fun. It's a great night out.
Well, I mean, even I remember them being a great night out 15, 20 years ago, and still is. But yeah, it was something we would do of an evening, a corporate event down at the Dogs. So I knew about the yellow Rolls-Royce. I didn't know about the plane. That's an interesting one. So talk to me about his time in Las Vegas. What took him to Las Vegas?
Well, I think that was sort of prompted when he had his spat with the Jockey Club over Johnny Frankham, my old mate Johnny Frankham. I check the obituaries every morning for Johnny. He's just that old, and when he had his spat with the Jockey Club, he was kicked off over a horse that was amusingly called Stopped. Was running at Sandown, and they accused him of laying this horse when it got beat and everything else like that. Written by John Frankham. Actually, his racecourse books that he produced had zero evidence whatsoever that he had actually laid the horse on track, but he was a lot cleverer than that. But there was no smoke without fire, as you can imagine. But he'd regularly stick it up to the racing authorities, as I think from time to time they have a reputation for. But he did that, and they put him off for 3 years. And I think, as a result of that, although he kept his race, his betting positions open during that time, with representatives and that kind of thing, he kind of grew out of love with the day-to-day grind of getting in a car and driving, 3 hours to Pontefract or, to Brighton or something like that. Even in those days when the business was good, he just fell out of love with the game. And especially when the advent of betting exchanges, he saw that as dropping the engine out of the business in terms of, the old margin debate. And also the way that bookmakers on racetracks operate these days was an anathema to somebody like him, who would just get up there and, stand horses if he felt they were at the wrong price. Well, Betfair teaches you what is the correct rate most of the time for horses, right up to the nth degree. And I think that was, that was the end for people like, bookmakers like my father, which there were plenty in those days. Great bookmakers, Colin Webster and all these sort of doyens of the ring. And he just basically went over to Las Vegas and spent his time over there playing golf and playing poker with, round at Bellagio and the Mirage and that kind of thing, and became a lot more relaxed. And I think he enjoyed his later life in Las Vegas.
Did you visit him out there?
Oh yeah, several times. I used to go and play golf with him. He was a desperate cheat. He used to have a famous Scots gambler friend that he used to take up to Bay Hill, where he was a member for a little while, which was because he was living in Florida, and he was a member at Bay Hill, and he knew that he would always beat this little Scots gambler who couldn't hit the ball 150 yards. Because I think at Bay Hill, I think it's the 17th, is a par 3 with a carry of about 220 yards. So he knew that no matter what the position in the game was, that little Jimmy couldn't get it across the water there. And he would try all sorts of tricks to basically win at golf. He was quite ruthless when it came to gambling.
What was his handicap?
God, it fluctuated.
Okay.
It fluctuated depending on the requirements. So I suppose he probably ended up playing off around about 15. But I mean, right. If he was playing somebody good, maybe he'd play off 20.
Yeah, all about the requirements. Okay, so was your first bet back then on the Dogs or a horse? Do you remember the very first time you parted with your own cash?
Oh God, I used to bet quite a lot with people like Tony Morris, a gentleman in the ring, Johnny White, that kind of thing. When I used to go to Slough Dogs, I used to take myself up there as a 14, 15-year-old, and I'm $5 on this dog and $5 on that dog and all this sort of stuff. Just used to love it. And in those days, all this underage crap that you got these days, everybody's a dribbling idiot, didn't exist. And so, everybody was up there having fun, having a bet, all this sort of stuff. We didn't turn into, into dribbling addicts. And, You know, Slough dogs became a regular pastime. Wimbledon as well. Going to see who, you know, people like Specky Henwood. I used to call him Specky, the man who used to bet without the favourite of Wimbledon dogs, John Henwood. And you know, I would go up there of an evening because you know, I just love it so much. So you know, greyhounds I think was you know, an important part of my life. And then I first started betting on behalf of my father as a complete greenhorn without the first clue of what I was doing at Reading Dogs. And I don't know if anybody knows anything about Reading Dogs, but you know, it's the domain of people like Terry Dartnell, who's an absolute genius at training, and he would get dogs ready, you know, regularly and all the rest of it. And although the business was profitable, I remember betting there and you know, knowing I was a complete novice at betting. I've got a little bit better these days.
So you took over from your father in 1998, but
yeah, basically 2003. I mean, he used to have a telephone only betting business in those days. Some legal, some not so legal, and that was the way of the world those days. People used to ring up, have a bet, would give a civilized service. It never turned out a bet. I don't ever remember saying no to anybody when I was on the phone to them, but whatever it was, you know, £100 Yankees and all this sort of stuff, and you know, 10 grand on this, 5 grand on that, whatever. And these bets were just taken. And you know, I did that when I was very young on his behalf. It was a fun way of a fun job. It was desperately badly paid. He used to pay me well below the minimum wage. He was an absolute shit in that regard. But you know, I used to enjoy it, and I would go racing with him from time to time, and you know, watch him in action. He was absolutely fearless on the racetrack. You know, I think I remember I was at Royal Ascot one day, and a few of the boys were coming down Tabor and these kind of things, 45,000 to 20. You know, I remember the horse in the Coventry, and he laid a 45,000 to 20, and with other bits and pieces, he had it for well over 50,000. Then Victor Chandler, you know, young Victor Chandler would come in and sort of back several horses to win 5 and 10 grand with them, usually middle pins, 6-8 to 1 chances. That was Victor's bread and butter. And after he laid that particular bet to Michael Tabor, I remember him hawking, the horse had collapsed into 13-8, and I remember him hawking 7-4, 7-4, 7-4, 7-4. And I said to him, Dad, what the hell are you doing? You've still got this horse for 50 grand. I mean, you know, what are you doing here? It's the Coventry. And he said, well, I'm getting it cheap, son. Which was exactly the way he was. You know, he then determined that, okay, 9-4 was probably a bit too big, but now he was getting at 7-4, laying the whole thing at an average of, say, 2, for argument's sake. Nice, easy maths for everybody. And that to him was how he basically made money, but just basically by being a bit more fearless than anybody else and prepared to lay horses if he thought they were the wrong price, or getting them cheap, as they say. And as luck would have it, of course, I remember that day he got it beat.
So, like, as a father figure, he sounds like a hell of a role model, and he's also exposing you to quite an exciting lifestyle with the planes and the rollers and meeting the jockeys. So, was there ever a period where you entertained the idea of doing anything else apart from getting into bookmaking?
No, I tried the Playboy bit between 20 and 25 years of age and all the rest of it. I did okay at that. It didn't pay very well.
Okay.
So I had to return to the UK. I was working abroad, ski instructor and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
I was any of that kind of stuff. But the pay was terrible. And
where did you do the skiing?
Sorry,
where was the skiing?
That was mainly in France in those days.
Nice.
Where it was terrifying. And so, yeah, I did that for a while, but it was miserably paid. And I had to come back to the UK to sort of put the roots down. And racing seemed to me to be a natural fit, although he insisted that I should get out of the game, that I would never make a career out of it. And the business was going in the wrong direction, and Betfair this and da-da-da-da-da. And so he used to tell me on a regular basis to get out of the game.
So, and so now, presumably, you don't have much recreational betting interest because you've got positions as a bookmaker. But previously, when you were more into the betting side of things, were you a net winner? Any sports you would highlight as being particularly strong at or particularly weak at from the recreational?
I was a reasonably good punter at American football because I used to make a bit of a study at it. But at everything else, I was absolutely pants.
Yeah.
And any self-respecting trader would realize that any account I had with them, I would bet quite modestly, you know, £1,000 on this, 500 on that, not big. And any self-respecting trader worth their while would know that those accounts were going to lose, even if they fluked a few winners, that kind of thing. Never any early morning prices, nothing to ever raise any hackles. But these days, I think I have just one betting account with a company that is slightly less draconian on the gambling commission, you know, measures for data and that kind of thing, because I'm not going to give anybody my bank account. Why should I? In order to have a bet. That's the way I feel. So I actually only have one account that I can physically have a bet with these days. Nobody else would lay me an egg.
Yeah, sure. So what about?
So I do understand when people talk about they can't get on, they can't get a bet, all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I do understand.
I think it'll be impossible for us not to get onto that in a few minutes. But so as a punter or as a bookmaker, do you have one standout bet or position you've taken where you've really thought, I deserve to pat myself on the back there? John would be proud of me. You know, what's been the sort of one where you've really done well?
Well, I would say probably more the ones where I've lost. I mean, a lot of people think about, in betting, only you ever think about their winners. I tend to think about, the money that I lost and, should I have lost that money and all the rest of it. I remember a particularly galling day at Cheltenham. I think it was in maybe 2009 when Cato Star won the Gold Cup that year. And I was going into the final day, I was winning. It was kind of deadly. So you're a bit more gung-ho, and I got a call the night before, what price was Cato Star? And I said it was 7-4. Would I take 80,000 for it? Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. I'll lay that bet. The 80,000. So that's 140,000 to 80, as you know. And in the same phone call, the punter involved, a gentleman by the name of David Power, you might have heard of, one of the greatest bookmakers of all time, the famous Irish laird David Power, sadly gone. And he said, "Oh, just while we're at it, Geoff, what price is which to lineman in the later race? An earlier race." And I said, "Well, that's 9-2, David." And he said, "Well, we'll have 40 on that as well, just while we're having." He said, "Just while we're having a bet." He said, so he had 40,000 on which to lineman. And I don't know if anybody ever saw that race with which to lineman. A few of your viewers unquestionably know about the famous horse race and whatever, but that cost me £180,000 earlier on in the day, which to lineman. And then, of course, Cato Star won the Gold Cup in very impressive style later on. I knew I didn't have a chance. I think I was doing the guts of near on 500,000 after 3 or 4 races at Cheltenham on the Friday, having started off the week a few hundred grand in front and feeling a bit bullish and all the rest of it. And then I got a phone call after the Cato Star race saying, did I want to lay 40 grand out of a horse called Harbour Pilot, which I believe was ridden by the famous woman, lady jockey Katie Walsh. And the horse nearly unseated Katie at about the second or the third fence on the first circuit. I mean, like, she was all but out the saddle. But, Katie being Katie, she was in there like a limpet mine, wouldn't let go, and never stopped working on this bloody thing. There was no chance of it ever winning the race realistically. But, after which to lineman, we were just punch drunk. Yeah. And she did get beat in the end, Harbour Pilot. But honest to goodness, it was a bad day. But you learn your lessons in life. But people that say that bookmakers don't lay bets, it's not quite right.
So what was the lesson? Did anything change after that?
No, I don't think that was a salient lesson in like what not to do in life. But I think one of the things you learn is you can be hoisted on your own petard, or if your balls get a little bit big sometimes in this game, you can go into meetings either as a punter or as a bookmaker and be well in front and think you're invincible and can never back a winner. And as we all know, in the world of betting, something that the Gambling Commission doesn't understand, I don't think, is that people go on runs. You know, they win, they lose, and you know, when they're losing, they can't stop losing. It just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. When they win, they can't stop winning. They can't explain why it is that they have these, you know, these kind of situations. But I think that in that regard, I think I kind of learnt that, you know, the fact that I was in front after 3 days at Cheltenham did not necessarily mean I was going to continue to beat every bet, and I didn't.
So would that have been? Were you on course for the whole?
I was on course at that time. Yeah, on course and off course. I think it was a telephone betting operation at that time.
Yeah, and am I misquoting you? I think did you say that on course is now mainly for like the social elements?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, even at some of the busiest meetings, you know, I mean, funnily enough, the crack at places like Campton on Boxing Day, I enjoy that more than say some days at Ascot, which, you know, Ascot's you know, it's a big impressive racetrack, but honestly it takes a hell of a lot of filling. And you know, you're now surrounded by all these tote betting outfits, you know, Ascot Bet and all the rest of it, you know, and quite often the punters don't get near you because it's so vast. So I actually enjoy, as a bookie, well, it is a social thing for me, but I actually enjoy going you know, to some of the smaller racetracks, as I say, like Campton on Boxing Day, which I think is, you know, I think it's a superb little racetrack for to watch racing. You're right, quite close up to the horses and everything else like that, and it's got a good atmosphere, and people are, you know, wanting to get out in the fresh air after, you know, an indulgent Christmas. So it works very well. Another track I like very much in its way is Epsom, from the fact that when you're at Epsom, it's just such an amazing spectacle to look out there. And I really wish, you know, I hope that Jim Mullen turns around that, you know, that behemoth into what it was before, starts, you know, promoting the hill and letting everybody in free in the middle and all this sort of stuff, to try to just say, right, fuck it, the hill is for nothing, come in there, whatever, put all the facilities in there and all the rest, and really create what it was before. But you know, that, you know, Cheltenham is fun for us, Love Glorious, Goodwood, York, all these sort of places. I mean, you know, British racing when it's at its best is, you know, the best in the world.
Yeah, I was at Windsor a few weeks ago, and it was just a perfect British summer evening of entertainment, fun, and yeah, sort of a rare moment where you felt really proud to be British. That we don't get many of those these days. So, you've talked.
Yeah, if I can make the point that you know, that one of the reasons why I still go racing these days, and most of my colleagues have now departed the ring. You know, I very rarely see, you know, bookmakers who lay proper bets these days, or are not engaged in the business of arbing, you know, and all this sort of nonsense that they do. They're nice people, but you know, it's a cancer on their own operation. And but I mean, one of the great things about going racing these days is to watch the engagement between the racetrack bookmakers and their customers, and how enjoyable British people find, how much enjoyment they derive from having a bet. And you know, I'd like to take a few people from the Gambling Commission actually out racing, stick them on my joint, let them stand next to me and see what the hell goes on, and let them see the faces that are in front of them, and it might change, you know, it might change their attitudes to, you know, not just the, you know, the engagement and the fun that people are having, the laughs that they see when they have a winner and all the rest of it, and the chat that goes on between the bookmakers and the punters, you know, but also to see that British people as a society are incredibly experienced with their betting. You know, they really understand having a bet these days. They're very, very, it's rare that you get somebody comes up and doesn't know what each way is, for example. There are a few, but they're, you know, they're a lot less than what used to happen in the past. Most people that come racing and have a bet, they're really very experienced. They're not dribbling idiots. And I think I enjoy that side of the business a lot.
100%. I had my first bet at a point to point when I must have been about 12, probably fiver. Felt like all the money in the world, maybe even less. And at Windsor a few weeks ago, everyone's betting on their phones and on their apps. I wanted to bet with the bookmakers with cash, and it felt the same as it did 30 years ago. And yeah, absolutely, it's a brilliant experience. And yeah, I love the interaction with the bookmaker and actually speaking to the person that you're taking on. And when I started getting into betting, I thought it was me against the bookmaker. And when you're betting on course, it reminds you that kind of what it is. You know, right? This is my cat.
Yeah. But that's a key point because, you know, these days I think myself and, you know, maybe reel a couple of names off like James Lovell or AK Bets, Anthony Kaminskis, you know, Ben Keith. There are very few people that when people actually have a bet, they are reasonably familiar with who it is they're actually having a bet with. It's me. It's going to me, it goes in my pocket, and I go off and I spend on sweets and crisps and whatever I want and buy myself a new Bentley. But they know it's coming to me. That's far more personal, and they know at the end of the day that with these kind of businessmen, they're likely to get a better, you know, they're likely to get a better class of service, a more civilized service. It doesn't mean to say we crack all the nuts and we can possibly get everything right these days, because the nature of betting has changed, unfortunately. But the bottom line is that betting with us is just a lot more personable. We still offer all the facilities, all the online website, all that crap, you know, the mobile phone, all this stuff. We offer all of that kind of stuff, but with a little bit more, you know who you're actually betting with. I bet nobody can tell me who's the boss of William Hill right now, who's the bookmaker. I mean, who's the bookmaker at Ladbrokes, and who's the bookmaker even at Bet365? You know, it's difficult for, you know, these are faceless behemoths, entities, they're just entities like Amazon, you know, like they are massive global supermarket betting companies. And I think it's a shame that, you know, that people feel this way, that they can no longer engage with their bookmaker, which is when you come to racetracks, you know, you're going to get a chance, come racing, you're going to get a chance to meet me. How fabulous is that?
Well, Geoff, it's interesting that you mentioned, obviously you, but Ben Keith and AK, because I would say that those three books are the three that I would know take a view, are not afraid to offer a big price and go and make it public that you want to be best price on something. And so you pick those three, yourself included, but absolutely those are the ones that are known for saying we're taking a view on this. And that's what bookmaking, you know, is meant to be. You have a view. You're not just sitting in the middle. So you talk a little bit about the change in the bookmaking industry when the exchange came along, and obviously I want to keep this brief because I know you've done War and Peace on it elsewhere. But in terms of sort of the restrictions, so you are known for taking on high rollers, laying decent bets. But I'm aware that you think there is a trader type account and there is a punter type account. Do you feel strong that is a binary, or do you think there is some grey area where you sometimes can get it wrong?
Well, yes, of course. I definitely think we can get it wrong, 100%. You know, there will be people that turn around and say, "Oh, or can you look into my account and whatever?" And I then intervene into something that maybe one of my guys has looked at and said, "Well, we don't fancy this account. We might have to put a minimum." Most of 99% of any action that we would have to take against punters is based on the time when that punter can start to take his price. That's it. It isn't a case of the amount. It might be, they can still get a bet on. They can still have a 50, 100, 200 pounds. So there are no silly £1 bets with us. We don't go in that direction. I mean, if we really didn't fancy somebody because they were just too inspired and say they were an absolute expert in cricket, never ever bet elsewhere with cricket, but clearly knew their game and everything else, and then obviously in such circumstance we wouldn't offer them derisory bets. We would just write them a nice letter and say, look, we can't beat you, we have to close you. But that is incredibly rare. People can take that as they want, they can believe it or not, but it is factual. The people who, in my opinion, betting on both sides has to be about risk. When people bet with me on any race and any football match or any tennis match or anything like that, we end up gambling our money against the punter. We can lose. We don't trade that bet. We don't have Betfair diddling around on Betfair, putting the bet back or anything else like that. We just lay the bets, and we hope that we lay the bets at the right prices, because if we do, then we will prosper. We lay all the wrong prices, we will fail. And there are plenty of bookmakers that fail. So betting for me has to be about risk. The difference between a punter, and I know everybody describes themselves as a punter, but there are a lot of people, an increasing amount of people in the tens of thousands, who are not punters, they are traders, in that they expect with their system, whatever their system is, to make profit out of just about every trade that they have. Now, sometimes that might be somebody that, for example, bets at longer prices. And so he would reasonably expect to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 losers in a row. But if he's getting value on the each way, we offer more places than anybody else. You know, we're certainly as competitive as Bet365 on our prices and each way. You know, or you know, something like a person betting at very long prices can bet a number of losers, but yet still show a profit during the course of the year. And then you have the more simple systems, like people who trade, who are every single bet that they have will only ever bet with you when your price on your betting site is bigger than the betting exchange in that cyber moment of time, and they will trade that bet for profit. So that, Dave, is the difference for me as a regular bookmaker, as a you know, that's what I live and breathe. I am a full-blooded bookmaker, and I believe the punter must be prepared to lose in order for him to have an account with me. You must be prepared to lose. If you're not prepared to lose to me, you know, in your activities with me or your activities as a punter, I don't want you. You're not a punter. You are a trader. You're doing the same bit. You're effectively in the same business as me. You're asking me as a business to support your business. And I'm sorry. I've been very, very open and clear over that for many years. Yes, I've had a few brickbats thrown at me for being open and honest about that situation. But at the end of the day, you have to be, if you're a punter, truly a punter, you are involved in the business of risk. You put your £100 down on Cato Star, he may win, he may lose, he may fall at the last, anything can happen, and you're risking that £100. You're betting to your opinion. You can be inspired, you can be clever, you can have done all the form studies you like, you know, and come up with, oh, Scunthorpe will beat Bradford today, because you've done your work, you've done your science, and I think those kind of bets should be respected. But if you're just trading it using whatever tools or versions, whatever you do, exchanges or algorithms or, you know, clever websites, matched websites and all the rest of it, which place bets on your behalf, then you're not welcome.
So that's very honest, Geoff. Would you be as honest enough to say, has anyone ever written to say, I think you've got it wrong here, and you've reversed the decision? Or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, not infrequent. Frequently, people will write, and what usually happens is we'll tend to give them a bit of a second chance, if you like, give them more time, have a further look. But almost nobody starts off with an account with us and is not still betting with us in a month. And I mean, I see some people come on social network and say, as usual, they'll have a go. Oh, I had my account restricted. And I can't get a bet on now. And then I often go and have a look at their accounts, and I see £50, £50, £100, £50, £20, £50, £100. Average bet stake £68, and he said he couldn't get a bet with me. Oh, he made a lifetime profit £3,856, and I should still do business with him. And when you add that bottom line to when we look at these keys, you've also got to think about how much do I give to my friend Martin Cruddas and to my friend Jim Mullen at Jockey Club. You know, every time I take a bet, give them 2% of my turnover for all of these kind of customers. So if they turn over during the course of their activity, you know, £50,000 for argument's sake, I'll be giving £2,500 to racetracks for the courtesy of doing that business. So he turns over 50 grand. I pay him £3,250 in profit, and I give my racetrack friends £2,500 for their turnover charges. I mean, sorry, we all have to get with the new economics, and this is how betting works these days. And there are lots of people, you know, filtering into the gravy train. I'm the gravy pot. The pot of gravy comes from my customers, but I am the gravy pot, and I have my expenses are going in all sorts of different directions. Time for my pay. I've got to pay 1% grifters levy to fund research into telling us how bad gambling is, all that nonsense that my friends at Flutter and Entain agreed to. Moronic decision to allow that money to go out. And so these are all costs on doing business with the average customer these days, and it has to be factored in. So if you're making the bookmaker no money, and you've turned over £100,000 for argument's sake, you're not going to be a great thrill to the bookie.
And Geoff, like, one thing I'm like super impressed with your approach to is your promotions aren't BS promotions. That I've got a note on it in a minute, but you actually offer, if you do this, if you do X, Y, and Z, we give you cash. You don't have to keep betting, turning over this convoluted, jumping through hoops. Very transparent, clear. This is a promotion. So while there are times where restrictions are required, on the flip side, what you're giving back in terms of those honest, fair, generous promotions is unique. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to understand. So I first you first got my respect when I can't remember what England football tournament it was, but you got it right when everyone was bigging England's chances up, and you were going big price. So how long have you been doing best price? How long have you been doing that? And how do you feel as a sports fan? Are you like part of you cheering them on, wants to do well, or is it all about the book?
England were last good. Experts on England will tell you the year. I think it was when Terry Venables was in charge. Okay. And it was played at, a lot of the matches were played at Wembley and all the rest of it. And I remember watching England at that time, and what they had on the park was, Gascoigne, Hoddle, Teddy Sheringham up front, Paul Scholes. What they had was an army of creative football players that could have won the World Cup, but didn't. They didn't because they couldn't kick a penalty. But they at that time they had all the creative flair that you see in teams like Argentina, who won the last World Cup, or France or whatever, who have creative players of such flair and ambition that they are able to turn a game of football round just like that in a moment. Mbappe and all these sort of up against Messi. And England certainly in the last 15, 20 years have had nothing like that. England are currently crap at football, but they have enjoyed dream runs in their progress. Dream runs. They've ended up in quarterfinals against Sweden and Kazakhstan and Malta. And then their semi-final they have to play. God knows where, to Finland, and whereas on the other half of the draw you'll have France teeing off against Spain, Italy, Germany, all this sort of stuff. England have been incredibly lucky, and to me, I always look at things like that. Are England value to lay? Oh yeah, there's superb value to lay. Even sometimes it got to the ultimate where I was going to lose an incredible amount of money if England had won the European Championships against Italy a few years back. But I knew, even going into the final, I was still very confident that Italy were far too good for that England side, and in order to win these games, we need an incredible amount of luck. Yeah, it's like people turn around and saying, "Well, that horse can win if the other ones fall." And that's what we need to happen. So yeah, I have taken a very strong opinion on current England sides, and right now I'm looking at the current England side, and I think they're terrible. I think they're dismal.
I think that it was that tournament where every single England goal leading through to the knockout rounds, deep into the knockout rounds, was from a set piece. They weren't scoring in open play, and that's kind of your luck thing. It's like, well, why aren't these guys scoring from open play? It's just, it doesn't fill me with confidence. So is that going to be the policy for Geoff Banks going forward? Every England international, you're going to be best price?
For as long as the current team takes the pitch, and the current available pool of talent, they literally don't have a player that you can sort of roll off a tongue and go, that's a game changer. That's the man, the one that attracts two or three other players around him, creates a space and creates the opportunities for the team. They just don't have one. Name one. There's just absolutely no one that they have that is akin to like the two wingers that are currently playing for Spain. The Dutch guy on the left, the Spanish guy on the right. They're just those kind of players playing on the wings these days for these kind of teams. They're outstanding. I mean, they're absolutely outstanding, game-changing players, terrifying players when they come at you with the ball. We don't have anything like that.
No, whenever I watch these international tournaments, you do watch these other teams play, and you look at the close betting, and England are second favourite, third, and you're thinking, what they're playing a different style of football here. What am I not seeing?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that in the future. What about, you mentioned jockeys being terrible tipsters. If you could ask one question to an individual that would reveal how much they know about betting, what would that one question be? How much you would trust them as an expert?
Oh, that's an almost impossible question. One thing they know about betting, I don't know. I suppose you would ask them, how would you guarantee a profit on something? You know,
Okay.
how would you guarantee a profit on a bet?
Okay.
And if they were able to tell you the answer, there are lots of ways, but if they were able to tell you the answer, you know that they've got some kind of a system.
Okay.
But it is an impossible question. The ones to be wary of are not those that are incredibly cocky that you see on Twitter sometimes telling you how much they, I'm not taking your offer, Geoff, where you give me money back because I never lose.
Oh, yeah.
These are the kind of guys that are very, very nice, that are easy to do business with, and all the rest of it, and never say a bad word. They're very, very polite and personable and all the rest of it. These are the clever ones because they know that in order to get on in life with bookmakers, you need to watch your P's and Q's and be nice and be respectful of the age-old battle, rather than be confrontational, in your approach with them. So I mean, many of the people I've done business with that I know are way too good for me have often been extremely nice people to do business with. Sure. You just keep sending them money.
What do you have any sort of cliches in the betting industry that particularly annoy? I really don't like it when people say the bookmakers don't often get it wrong, because I'm of the opinion they offer opportunities on everything. So there is always going to be one wrong selection. If you're picking Djokovic over Sinner, then you can't. So I don't like that expression. I also don't like it when they talk about pundits.
I think you talk about modern days bookmakers, I'll give you one expression I detest, which is one problem gambler is one too many. As if to say that bookmakers can or should be some kind of benevolent force for society. I would rather bookmakers behave a bit like the national gun lobby in America, and sort of turn around and say, well, we know that people don't like us from time to time. Why not just basically be a bit more honest about, we're going to beat you this week. If you're going to do business with us, we're going to beat you. We're going to do our best. It's going to be fun, but we're going to win your money. And rather celebrate the fact that, it is a battle. It is engaging. It is the bookmaker against the punter, instead of this, safer gambling podcast. What the hell is that about? I mean, I'm about winning money off my customers. I know Ben Keefe feels exactly the same way. I'm sure AK feels the same way. And these good, more traditional bookmakers, I'm about winning your money. I am here to win your money. I'm going to put some prices up there that you're going to go, oh, I like that price, and I like that offer, and I like these each way, and whatever. I'm going to end up with your money. That's my intention in life. I'm not sitting here going, well, I need to look after you and your family and everything else like that. I'm going to do my job with regard to monitoring, the level of your bet, your gambling activity. I'm going to do my job that way. But my intention is to win off you what you can basically afford to lose.
Absolutely. And I heard AK saying the other day how massively underestimated it is, that just the amount of utility we get as a nation from betting. It's just such a phrase that is associated with negativity, and the positivity around it is so rarely spoken about. And it's only when you meet people in the betting industry like people you will meet left, right, and center, day in, day out, and positive, happy, confident people are associated with betting. It's not all people who are, having some terrible life trauma because they like a little bet. And it's a
no, they don't. I know that problem gambling in the UK is a worldwide low, and the reason I know that is because I know that British people understand the product. They understand betting. They love to have a bet. It's not new to them. It's something that's been in the family. I see families come up to me on a racetrack with their children and going, "What would you want? What shall I have? What should I have a bet on, honey? What do you want to bet on? Oh, number 9. Okay, 250 each way, 9." And, you know, so this is the way the British people have been. I think this is the kind of, you know, the zealots are telling us that we shouldn't bet, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't eat, we shouldn't drink, we shouldn't smoke, we should stay indoors and wear our masks. And that's the, you know, these kind of people really don't understand, you know, how they're just going about wrecking society for the future, for their children, for their grandchildren, and all the rest of it. You're just destroying society out of some, you know, self-worth, basically. I want people to enjoy winning off me. I want people to say, when they win off me, I want to get paid right now. You know, send me my money, Geoff. I've won off you. Give me my money. You know, I want it to be like that, because that's the way it should be. Because guess what? When I take your money, I'll sit there and I eat my steak in the evening and drink a glass of wine and go, thanks very much. Yeah. Thanks very much, Cato's staff. But falling at the last, put the glass down. Don't feel, you know, shouldn't feel, you know, I want to have my customers, and I've done business with a lot of my customers for a long, long time or whatever, to be fully engaged in the product and to feel that it is a friendly battle between me and them.
Yeah. So if someone is an 18-year-old now watching this and they're thinking about getting into betting, either sort of recreationally or seriously, what would be if you could rewind back to you being 18, what would be the single piece of advice you would give yourself or that youngster?
Don't open up a licensed gambling operation in the United Kingdom.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid, but you know, unless you have a serious amount of customers to start off with in order to pay your expenses, you know, number of customers like in the millions, in order to pay the kind of expenses you're being asked to pay these days, with the increasing burden of regulation. We're not alone. Bookmakers aren't alone. You know, there's overregulation across the board, and we've got the wrong government in charge. They don't understand whatever the business is. They're overtaxing them, they're overcharging them, all this sort of crap. And they're overregulating them. They come in with this idea, we're gonna break down the barriers, they're gonna break down the barriers, but they don't. They increase the barriers. Why? Because we've invented regulators, and regulators are not going to sit there around their board tables and come up and go, well, maybe we ought to do nothing. Yeah. You know, but actually it seems to be going okay. You know, problem gambling is at 0.4%. That's a worldwide low. We're doing all right. Let's do nothing this month. Yeah. You know, no, that's not the way, but that's not the way it approaches. So for a youngster getting into betting these days, I would say, get yourself over to Canada and explore the possibility of opening up a little website in Kanawaki, where basically the rules are not so draconian, and it is much more of a one-on-one engagement between the bookmaker and whatever the customer cares to lose.
I mean, that's deeply depressing. I do think that some of it is there's starting to be a little bit of pushback, and potentially it is not going to end up where it looked like going. So when do you think was the turning point? 5 years ago, 10? If we had this conversation 10 years ago, would you have said the same thing, or when do you think it changed? My bigger brethren became a bit gung ho over the sort of 2010, which is sort of almost the infancy of websites and betting and apps and all this sort of stuff. And between 2010 and 2020, and although they had good measures in place for punters, and don't forget they came up with some good measures like deposit limits and these kind of things, and self-exclusions were all on their own websites, but they were not vigorous in making sure that everything worked properly. You know, companies like Skybet were busy marketing to 50,000 self-excluded customers on their books. I mean, I would have been out of business. Skybet survived and got a £1 million fine from the Gambling Commission for that. So, you know, they, as companies between 2010 and 2020, they largely behaved in a rather gung-ho way because, you know, the regulator wasn't quite tough enough on them at that time. The Gambling Commission wasn't quite tough on them when they did things wrong. And in 2020, around about, I think, or 2021, a fellow arrived at the Gambling Commission by the name of Andrew Rhodes, and he took over the reins, and he's much more of a cowboy, and he started taking on these big companies with record fines and all the rest of it. The bottom line is it has gone too far.
in my opinion. The betting is way overregulated, and they really do not understand the product that they're regulating. But the bottom line is that the regulations that the bookmakers had in place in between 2010 and 2020 were good regulations and kept the problem gambling level extremely low. They just had to be enforced. They just had to make sure, the Gambling Commission just simply had to make sure that they were actually doing what they said on the tin in that period, which they were not always doing. And you got these sort of, larger cases of, a nurse lost £250,000. Of course she didn't. It was somebody else's bloody money. It was a trader's money. But the bottom line is that there were these cases, and this has allowed the Gambling Commission to come in and pounce upon the industry and start giving record fines and, bigging themselves up, And so I think in order to get things right, we need to make sure that what was happening between 2010, 2020 is happening today and is properly and vigorously enforced. And to be fair, the largest companies have gone way the other way now, such that they are pissing their clients off at a gargantuan rate, forcing them to give a financial paperwork, single customer view ambitions and all this sort of stuff, and breaking down their bank statements to find out what they're spending the money on. Oh, he bought a Mercedes this month, did he? Oh, well, he's got a few quid and all this kind of stuff. It's gone way too far the other way. And we need to move back towards the middle ground of, yes, do business, yes, trying to win money off people, but also making sure that we do our job with regard to keeping a vigil on somebody that's betting all night, overnight, depositing more money than they normally do, and intervening with that customer at the right time to say, hold on a second, are you okay? Did you just lose it a little bit last night? Do you want to take a little bit of a break from gambling for a while? That kind of thing. That kind of sensible approach should be where we are. And that's what makes it, we talk about it being a bit depressing for me. Yeah, it is depressing, but it is led by my big company chums, and they need to stand up for themselves, stand up for they don't talk enough about how much fun betting can be, and they need to get back to laying bets, because there's far too many stories out there of them not laying bets, and when they do lay bets, closing people down for the wrong reasons, using responsible gambling measures unquestionably to restrict people unfairly, or to even stop them betting under the guise of responsible gambling. A guy at Epsom, for example, the other day, having a single £80 bet being tagged as a responsible gambling issue. It's nonsense. It's a lie. It's a fiction. So that kind of behavior needs to stop.
So I think you essentially what you're saying is it's common sense, and you have a common sense approach to many of these things. And there are many people like you out there who articulate it very passionately and very clearly. Do you feel that you're getting anywhere with it, or do you feel you're just shouting in an empty room?
Dave, I think I'm in a very small minority of people that are prepared to say anything. Yeah. Clearly, I'm far more vocal than my colleagues. Most of my racetrack bookmakers have got nothing to say about this whole matter. They think it doesn't exist for them, or won't exist in the future. Big companies have allowed the Betting and Gaming Council, who've been utterly impotent to act on their behalf with regard to, procedures and regulations and all the rest of it. I mean, utterly impotent. They're still going on about one problem gambler being one too many, and diversity programs and this kind of crap. People are not interested in if Ladbrokes give money to pancreatic cancer causes. It doesn't suddenly make Ladbrokes or look at how amazing Ladbrokes are because they gave money to cancer. I mean, shut up. This isn't, Ladbrokes are a gambling company here to win. You're here to win off people, and there will always be the age-old enemy and everything else. Trying to portray them as some kind of amazingly force for the common good, and we won the diversity program award, and we're the operator of the year. People are not interested in stuff like that. Get back to where you were at the start, being bookmaker and trying to win people's money and making that part fun and engaging, and laying bets and sticking up people when you win, and taking the brickbats when you lose. And that's the way it should be.
It's exactly what I said a minute ago. It's like if you give the average Joe on the street the option to bet with a company that is doing all this great stuff for a charity, or you offer them a promotion that actually is real money, real terms, beneficial to them, and know which way they're going to go. So, so just remind me of what your latest offer is, because you do something that is, I think, is unique. That you actually you give up to like £500 cash.
Yeah,
you don't have to bet in free bets.
It's a real smash and grab rate. I mean, it attracts interesting comment about it. But basically, my customers, when they open up an account with me, we will work their account for 3 months, and at the end of that 3 months, their aggregate, if they lose, we will refund 10% of those losses in cash. There's no free bets. There's no stipulation, number of bets or anything else like that. If you come onto us and you have one single £100 bet and you never have another bet, you get £10 back. It's just as simple as that. We won't say you have to have 15 bets or has to be at 1 to 2 or better or something like that. We don't have any stipulations. I would try to design every offer that I do to make it achievable and easy for the customer to gain it, to make it very, very simple. And so at the end of that 3 month period, when that's up, every morning my office is engaged in refunding to the people that money that they may have lost.
Yeah.
And that can be anything up to £500. In other words, they would have to have lost over 3 months, £5,000 to us. And basically we are, we don't end up with the £5,000, as you know, because we've got an awful lot of costs. But if we did, that customer would get £500 back in cash, and it would be withdrawable today, right now, in your hand. Take that money and put it back in your bank account.
No strings attached. £5,000 single loses. I wait 3 months. You give me 500 quid.
It's correct. So I mean, even for the traders, that's a pretty good deal. You're basically improving the odds, your odds of reward, everything else like that. Of course, there are plenty of geniuses out there watching this pod right now who say, I never ever lose from bookmakers. Why should I be interested in offers like that? Well, it's not aimed at you.
Yeah. If they exist.
It's aimed at the realist who sort of says, I can lose, or I normally lose to bookies because that's what I do. That's how I spend my recreational money. And I'm likely to lose to Geoff, but at least I'm going to get a few quid back at the end of 3 months. I wouldn't get that from Bet365.
Yeah, indeed. So my final question before we wrap up is, I'm a little bit nervous asking you this, Geoff, but if you were...
It's nothing sexual, is it?
Very much the opposite of that, no. It's... if I were to offer you 5 to 1, you've been asked this many times over a glass of wine, I'm sure, but if I were to offer you 5 to 1 about the fair toss of a coin, and you could transfer cash to me now, and we'd have that bet, what are you staking?
5 to 1.
5 to 1 against.
I mean, about a fair toss of the coin. I mean, this is, I think you're sort of leading towards some of these silly bookmaker offers where they sort of say, I'll give you 50 to 1 Constitution. You're a mug if you take an offer like that.
No, but this
is for £1.
This is
£1 or £2 or something.
This is a gentleman's agreement between you. I just want to know how your approach to risk assessment on a 50-50 that you're getting 5 to 1. Some people have said no bet. Some people have said half the life savings.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you could physically get on, you would put everything on it. You would put everything you have on a bet like that, because
so
it should be evens. But we know that anything that sounds too good is often not that good.
No, but this is a real genuine opportunity. You put your entire net worth on a 50% chance because the payout is so good.
Yeah, it would be a significant bet. Let's put it that way. I don't think I would put my entire net worth on it. So my wife might object on one spin of the coin. And whose coin is it? Who's doing the spin? David Copperfield?
David Hipkin, and you can trust me. But what I'm pleased, Geoff, is after an hour and probably listening to you for 10 years, I finally got you to sit on the fence about something. So
okay,
I'll take that as a small win.
Fair enough. That's a win.
All right, Geoff, brilliant. Look, really enjoyed that. If people were going to, obviously, they know about Geoff Banks, the bookmaker. If they were going to follow you, you looking for followers on Twitter? Do you do YouTube? Anything else?
Yeah. No, we've got Twitter. We've got an interesting website called Gambling Matters, which Graham Sharp writes for. I don't know if you know about Graham Sharp. He used to work as PR for William Hill many years ago, and he does a regular column in our Gambling Matters website. It's not a betting site. It's not for gambling or anything like that. It's just for people interested in, in stories about gambling, stories about racing, and stories about betting and all the rest of it. You should look on the Gambling Matters website. Because it's quite fun. I mean, I was reading Graham's latest blog this morning. Got old stories about old jockeys and old trainers and horse races and all the rest of it. You should read it. It's really fun website. There's nothing to be gained by us. It's just literally, an interesting place for people to go to reminisce about, great betting stories, racing, all that kind of thing.
Brilliant. We'll link that up. And yeah, well, Geoff, thanks a lot. And like I say, you're a man who sticks to your principles across all sorts of topics, and that is to be respected. And thank you very much for your time. And hope to talk to you again.
Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Geoff. Bye-bye.
Cheers.